Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of Engineering Your Decision. So we're so glad that you're checking out. If you missed our first video, it's in your email basket somewhere, and you definitely can see that. This is the second in our series of 3. And we really just kind of laid the table out a little bit. And in the first episode, kind of talking a little bit about how our student Maeve made her decision and some things that she looked at. And Lori gave some really nice broad tips. But we're going to get a little more detailed here and really get into that kind of fit and finances and helping, give some tips on making that decision. So once again, I'm joined by our student, Maeve Haggerty. So it's good to see you, Maeve.
Good to see you too.
And still a freshman from Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. So cool. So hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing really good. And I'm excited to talk about how you, with your college visits, we talked a little bit in the first episode about you visiting schools and things. What tips would you give families as they're on campus? What should they look out to? What were things that you were like, oh, I definitely want to talk to this type of person, or I definitely want to see this type of facility, or I just want to sit in the grass and feel the campus.
Yeah.
Like, how'd you go about it, and what did you find out? What was really good, and maybe what ended up being some things that weren't as good?
So I sort of made a plan beforehand. I'm a planner, so I printed out a few maps. I drew little lines saying, "Oh, here, Mom, this is where we're gonna go first, and we're gonna walk down here." So I should have expected my future as a tour guide here, but so I made that plan because I packed my schedule with different types of tours and different places I wanted to see, and we only had a few days, a few hours in the day. So
Right.
obviously we had to pack it all in. We were walking all across campus. I would say seeing residential side was definitely very helpful, and making that trek over there is a good visit because things like that's where you spend most of
You're
your
gonna
time
live
here.
there.
Yeah. So knowing the food options, that's another thing.
Yeah.
That definitely swayed me. Learning that there's a Qdoba and a Panera Bread in the bottom of my own dorm was very inspiring.
Oh my gosh, times have changed.
Yeah. But definitely to plug my own organization, PSEF, take an engineering tour because it will help you, especially if you're interested specifically in engineering, and maybe you'll be paired with someone in a major that you're excited for. Try to talk to them, ask them questions, ask a current student, because getting those experiences with current students will be those one-off things that might just snap something in your brain and say, oh, I do want to go here, and I do want to do engineering here. And that it is possible to see students thrive in the majors that you're excited for is definitely very inspiring. So, yeah.
Did you do a lot of formal? I know the PSEF tour is a pretty formal program. Did at most schools, was it a formal sort of admissions program and a formal tour, or did you wing-a-ling-a-ding it and kind of use your maps and
Yeah.
just was it a variety?
It was definitely a variety. I went at a weird time, so something like one of the local schools I went to, we had a virtual map, so it was an app, and it would like speak to you, which was definitely a little difficult because there was that barrier between a personal connection and a real person and being virtual. But if you can't tour a place, I would say find those virtual options. Don't just look at pictures and call it a day. There are virtual tours. If it's not like I said earlier, if it's not a Purdue produced video or content, you can find a student who's done a tour of Purdue online. And those things, they definitely will help you. Even if you can't make it physically on tour, you might be able to get a good look into the school just from a few videos.
That's a good point and a nice transition. And so forth as what are some other resources that helped you get a feel for the school? Maybe if you couldn't be here and you didn't get a chance, or did you talk? Was there video conferencing? Was it watching YouTube videos you mentioned? What were some things that helped you get maybe a sense of the culture of the place and just kind of learn more about opportunities?
Right. So I started with, since it was lockdown, I started with a lot of Zoom information sessions, a lot of Q&A sessions. And what I would say for those, if you're going to any sort of Q&A, have questions prepared before you go, because you're going to look a little unprepared and not ready for those, for the time when they say, okay, questions. I think that's a good portion of those information
And
sessions.
I can say we like getting
Yeah.
questions on behalf of
Mhm.
all of those on the other end.
Yeah.
Because we like to know that people are engaged, and we want to know what are you interested in,
Right.
so that we can hopefully meet that need.
And
So,
I would say definitely reach out to as many people as you can. Maybe if you know a current student here or an alumni. I knew one person from my high school who went to Purdue. One person, so wasn't many options, but luckily I knew her. We were friends, so I reached out to her. I said, "What would you say about the culture of Purdue?" I wasn't really asking her about academics because I knew she was in a different major, but she pretty much said, "Oh, for the games, you should go to these, go to the football games, go to the volleyball games, basketball, and there's a ton of clubs. This is what I'm in." And she was definitely a big part of my decision. Just having anyone to reach out to. And I also talked to people in the civil engineering department, and I got a very personalized tour of Hampton Engineering. So she showed me around. It was great. She gave me time for Q&A, so I prepared questions. Luckily that time, I learned my lesson. Yeah.
asking questions. You talked about really good tip, and if you know someone that's and that's going to be really informal. If it's
Mm-hmm.
someone from high school or something, but also know that many of our, I can speak to Purdue and working with PSEF and the students. It really is about trying to give a very realistic picture of what it's like. So if you don't know someone at the school and you want to talk to a student, I mean, an example of that is the Purdue Student Engineering Foundation is you can reach out on your website and
Mm-hmm.
literally set up an appointment. We also do have lots of options through our broadcast to hear from students. So I think that's really a really good tip. And the more people you can kind of get talking to, sort of the better, I
Definitely.
think. So kind of with that, you're out of state, right? So we've talked a little bit about, kind of what the, what it's like to be at Purdue and the fits side of thing. Where did coming out of state, what kind of things did you think about from a financial standpoint in order to kind of say, yeah, I think Purdue, both fit and finances will work for me here?
Right. So, in a comparison to my other schools that I had on the top of my list, it was on the cheaper side, just from that, without getting any money from anywhere else. And then when I received my admissions and I received a scholarship, that just blew it over the moon. It was one of the only schools I did receive money from, so I was very grateful for that because it was already moving up to the top of my list, and that just kind of set it off even more. So when it came down to it, it was between two schools here and one school in state for me. So when it came down to those, the prices were honestly pretty similar. When I did those calculators and figured
Right.
out worked it out how much it would be. So when it came down to the financials were somewhat similar. This might have been a little bit more expensive than the in-state, but when I compared the fit compared to the finance.
The finance, yeah.
When I
It's
compare
a lot
those
of
two,
F's.
yeah, I know. Um, the feel of Purdue did outweigh that slight difference in
In
financial.
finding
Yeah,
that. Yeah, those are, again, considering all of it as part of your college choice is really important. Appreciate you sharing all that with us. So we're now going to transition to Lori Pence. So good to see you again, Lori.
Good seeing you, David.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Well, it's that time of year, right? So
Yes, it's a very important and exciting time.
yep. And so financial packages are kind of starting to hit. Most of our scholarships came with admissions, right, early on. But as far as what should people be kind of looking for and seeing around this time?
Yes, so the university scholarships, the trustee and presidential, those were notified at the time of admissions in January. But for institutional scholarships, need-based scholarships, College of Engineering scholarships, those notifications will first be coming apparent this month in the financial aid award notifications that get uploaded to the My Purdue portal under the financial tab. So those families that filed a FAFSA by, I would say, mid-January, definitely by December 17th, you should be seeing an award notification, as well as the students and families. If a student did receive a trustee or presidential, they'll be seeing that notification again in their financial aid notification. So what's really nice about the financial aid notifications is it outlines the cost of attendance and all the different types of assistance that the student could be receiving from Purdue, both from a merit scholarship to need-based to grants. So they get to see the full picture at one time. So it's really a great snapshot.
And they're gonna, well, we're sort of giving Purdue's timeline a little bit here, but I would imagine many other universities are going to be landing around this time, or hopefully before May 1st, right? So how do families go about comparing financial packages from one university to the other? Because there's so many different terminologies and types of funding and
Yes,
what
yes,
chips?
exactly. So I often say award notifications can come in all shapes and sizes and colors and look very different, which can be extremely challenging for students and families to really start to make sense of. You need to be a consumer, ask a lot of questions, especially if this is your first time going through this process. But ideally, you don't, oftentimes, families will hone in on scholarship amounts, and the larger amount might indicate that this would make it the most affordable. But you have to take that into consideration with the cost of attendance, because your largest scholarship amount also might be coming from the institution that costs the most. So in reality, it may not be the most affordable. So cost of attendance is going to vary from all the different institutions. The EFC, the estimated family contribution, should be stagnant. That was derived from filing the FAFSA. But ideally, when you want to get to an apples to apples, families need to be looking at the net cost, or what will be the out of pocket cost to go to that institution after all of the assistance is taken into consideration. And that's what that cost, that out of pocket cost, is what families should be comparing from one institution to the next, not necessarily their aid package or the scholarships that they're getting.
And what about students? This is kind of the upfront part, right? Going in. But what else should they look at? I'm going to imagine some folks are disappointed about scholarship offers. Purdue, we don't tend to give a lot of upfront scholarship money. I want to say about 10% of our engineers receive some sort of merit scholarship, typically. Is that about right?
That's about right. So Purdue is a public land grant institution, and that really comes into play regarding the amount of scholarship monies that we have to provide students. And this is, some students and families are disappointed because they're not receiving much of an aid package or did not receive a scholarship. And this can be quite disappointing for everyone involved. But something to keep in mind is, because I get this question a lot of what was I lacking? What didn't I do good enough? That there was some type of deficiency. And by any means, no one is deficient. If you got admitted to the College of Engineering, you were not deficient in
sure.
anything. So you again should applaud all of your hard work that is going to aid you in being successful at college. But we just run out of funds far quicker than we run out of qualified students. It's a very challenging time for us to kind of just selecting who's going to receive scholarships, because we have such exceptional students that are deserving and qualified of these scholarships, but unfortunately, we just don't have enough funds to give everyone that we would like to give a scholarship. But in keeping with that, because again, families that are maybe disappointed with their financial aid package, but Purdue's their number one choice, but it's not coming in number one for finances. And that's where, again, families need to, to really think about what they are able to contribute, the return on investment, and some maybe other resources outside of scholarships. And that's something that I talk with families about. The co-op program here at Purdue, long-standing. We've have a co-op program for, I know, over 30 years. And while we don't require students to have professional development experience, we strongly encourage it.
For sure.
And the students that participate in the co-op program, either the 3 rotation or the 5 rotation, those are rotational experiences where they're going to have a full-time job and they're going to be away from campus, and they get paid very well.
Yes.
And for a fall or spring rotation, they could make between 10 and 15,000. I know in talking with a lot of students that do a fall or spring co-op rotation, they are, usually able to save $5,000 or $6,000 from that experience, and that can aid them in helping to pay for educational expenses once they return to campus. So they're rotating between campus and work, but are getting such valuable experience, which is also a student success tool, because I know the students I talk with that when they come back from a co-op rotation into the classroom, sometimes they've already learned something new that now they're getting the lecture component, they're getting the content, but they've already had the applied learning, and it just really aids them in the classroom, and they do better in their coursework.
Right.
Because they have some real world life experience to draw on and make those connections with content and material. And that is the whole premise about the co-op program. But because engineers get paid quite well, it really is an affordability component for a lot of students that by participating in the co-op program means that they can afford to come to Purdue.
Yep. And internships are paid as well. Usually there's not as many of those because you're not rotating. Co-op is where you rotate between Purdue and a job, usually at least 2 rotations, commonly 3 to 5. But internships are done in the summer, usually, but they could be other times, but they're paid as well. Things like research opportunities could be for the love of learning or credit or pay, right? So there are some other things on campus that could help towards that affordability.
Exactly, yes. And so I just encourage families to look outside of scholarships or outside of loans in making Purdue affordable, and look at, again, we don't require internships or co-ops, but we really strongly encourage professional development because students are going to need that to be marketable when they're a senior and they're looking to go into the industry after they graduate. Or undergraduate research is really great for those students who are looking at R&D or already know that they're wanting to go to graduate school.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier return on investment. What factors should families be considering as they look into return on investment? How does Purdue stack up with that?
Return on investment is subjective for students and families, but so everyone kind of approaches it very differently, but I would say some consistent elements are the ranking. That seems to be important to families. I know that's important to employers, and that's why we have so many employers that come to Purdue every year to recruit our students. It's also our placement rates, which we have excellent placement rates, as well as starting salary. That kind of plays into loan indebtedness. Your starting salary, will you be able to afford the debt that you incur to get your education? the alumni, the network that not only at Purdue Network, but the Purdue Engineering Network and the alumni, not only here in the United States, but globally, and the name recognition of a Purdue degree, because the industry is going to know what those technical skill sets of that particular student is going to have just by having a Purdue engineering degree. Just the opportunities that are afforded to students here that they may not get at another institution. So those are some, I think, very typical elements that come into play in regarding return on investment.
Are loans a bad thing when considering, from any school? I mean, I know that becomes part of the package sometimes. What's the advice you typically get with loans? And I know that's probably could be its own video.
Yes, yes, most definitely. But the federal student loans is sometimes what we say good debt. I mean, um, it's an investment in your education into what you plan on doing for the rest of your lives. And so for many families and students, an education is going to be one of the largest expenses that the family has. And so to really think wisely about that. And obviously, loan indebtedness, there's a lot of rhetoric regarding that, but federal loans have caps on how much a student can borrow each year and what the maximum amount of loans. It is far under three figures. So, and but there is kind of a rule of thumb that a student should not borrow more money than what their starting salary is. So that's a really good metric or guide. I would advise those that are looking at private loans, so those outside of the federal loans. Again, you have to be a consumer and look at the interest rates, the repayment options, because they differ greatly. And so before you take out some private loans, you really should ask a lot of questions, be a consumer, talk to financial aid and some other experts, because there might be some other financial products that might be better suited before you start taking out private loans.
And I think, for sure on the hat you wear with student success. I mean, we want students to come, and I think you've mentioned this, but we want it to be affordable to a point where we want you to be able to stay here, and looking at trying to map out those 4 years. Worst case scenario, right? As far as how
Yes.
much it could cost, knowing that there are scholarships once you get here, you can apply for things like co-ops, but really looking into that and knowing that it is an investment.
It is an investment. And within the College of Engineering, students actually have a greater opportunity for the most part to be considered for scholarships, because within the College of Engineering, majority of our scholarships are for current students, because our donors are typically our alumni and they give back to the particular school that they graduated from. And so for students in their second through fourth year, typically are going to have a greater probability of getting a scholarship than coming in as an admitted first year engineering student.
Yeah, so all really good information and things to think about. Any last tip as families are sort of shuffling through their packages that we didn't hit? Was there anything else you wanted at this time of year you wanted to hit?
I'm a big on communicator that, families need to sit around their kitchen table and really have conversations, and it should be a collective decision-making process, but obviously, the ultimate decision rests on the student. I will say that finance is a significant factor, but if all is equal, much like our student, if the affordability is the same from an in-state to out-of-state because you receive some scholarships, or it's slightly higher, but the fit is really strong on a particular institution, then yield to the fit.
Yeah.
Always yield to the fit. And so, that's my word of advice, that students that that find that fit, often are going to be happy. They're going to thrive. They're going to go to class. They're going to be excited to be here. They're going to be excited about their major and their courses, and they're going to do really, really well.
Great. Excellent advice. We hope you've all found this to be helpful for our second episode. Really appreciate, thanks, Lori.
You're welcome.
Appreciate everyone tuning in, and please be on the lookout for our final coming in April, our final session. And again, if you get questions, reaching out to whether it's the financial aid office, if you have questions about programs and fit, please feel free to reach out to the Office of Future Engineers if there's clarification and things like that. Again, as Lori talked about communication, some of this can be confusing, and so the more understanding and the more information you have, the better. So please reach out to us, and we'll look forward to hopefully you checking us out on our third session, third video. So have a good one, and boiler up.